something I want to make sure we give time for is I wanted to turn it over to Sarah George. Something that Sister Beth mentioned was, this whole as we were planning this, 50 years, Ched Myers talked about, is a time for regathering, remembering, and envisioning the future. So earlier in the annual gathering, some of the young folks of CCA got together and talked about what our vision of the next 50 years is, what our hopes are for CCA's next Jubilee. Because we envision ourselves in your places in 50 years. And so Sarah's going to share a little bit. We would like your blessing on our vision. As you share your wisdom with us, we would just like to hear from you on what our vision is for the next 50 years. So Sarah's going to take a couple minutes and share, and then maybe you all will have some comments or at least can bless our vision.
Thanks, Ed. CCA is such a story-focused organization, so in honor of that and in thanksgiving for all of the stories that you all shared this evening, I wanted to share just briefly a bit of my story with those of you who don't know me. I'm an Appalachia transplant. I'm an Illinois native who largely grew up in suburban Baltimore. I found my way to Appalachia, to the foothills, by way of the Glen Mary Home Missioners and their farm in Vanceburg, Kentucky, which I reopened as Emmaus Farm after it was closed in 2014. After spending some time volunteering in the region, I've lived here full-time for almost 4 years next month, as the Director of Emmaus Farm, a retreat center where we host high school and college volunteer groups for service with the Lewis County community, Appalachian cultural immersion, and spiritual retreat with an emphasis on Catholic social teaching. I joined the CCA board almost 3 years ago and have had the privilege of serving as your vice-chair for the past 2 years. I've said before that finding CCA, meeting all of you, reading and praying with the 3 pastoral letters has really given home to the urgings of my heart that were largely born of living in these foothills here in Kentucky. I share this bit of my story because you are all a part of it. I follow in the footsteps of all of you. The young adults of CCA walk the path you've carved for us. When the way gets hard, we look to your words in the pastorals. We look to the wisdom of your experiences. We seek the guidance of your example. On Sunday of the annual gathering weekend, those of us in our 20s and 30s joined a morning coffee hour, and like CCA, it was member-led and discussion-based. The desire to have an event like this came from a collection of many conversations among members seeking community, connection, and fellowship, especially in light of increased isolation in 2020. Realizing that the next 50 years of CCA belong to us, we asked ourselves what we want those 50 years to look like, and what it looks like for us to be the church we wish to see in the world in 2020 and beyond. That coffee hour allowed us to brainstorm a few ways we can increase the connection we desire. Here are a few strategies that came forth from that conversation. 2020 has helped us see how much we really can do online, including both business meetings as well as fellowship. So we suggested monthly Zoom calls among young adult members. Another way this online collegiality can be maintained is with regular emails, perhaps with resources like articles, documentaries, and prayer and reflection series for liturgical seasons and feast days. When we are able to safely gather in person, we would like to implement quarterly fellowship gatherings, maybe with beer and a bonfire at places like my home, Emmaus Farm in Vanceburg, or places like Big Laurel or the Appalachian Catholic Worker Farm, places where we could have an overnight gathering with no agenda, but rather a source of friendship and celebration of each other's work for justice for Appalachia. During the coffee hour, we heard calls for increased CCA membership in parishes so that we could each cultivate more of a community of CCA in our own locations.
Has Sarah George been here?
A lot of us work with college students on both ends of immersion trips, sending them from universities and hosting groups here in Appalachia. We would like to find ways to connect with each other, to celebrate and support our work, but also to find ways to continue to engage college students who visit the region. These ways of connecting honor the fact that CCA is such an intergenerational group and celebrate the history of CCA that we have all entered into. In remembering CCA's roots, we aim to cultivate a radically Christian future, similar to the early church, dependent on fellowship and small communities. We recognize that as some CCA members are being called home, we are being called to action, to work together, to keep the voices in the pastoral letters alive for the next 50 years. These are the ways we feel we can fulfill our desire for togetherness while staying rooted in place, while supporting, celebrating, and sustaining our work, while being a prophetic voice of justice for Appalachia and her people, while being the church we want to see in the world. We are the future of CCA, and the next 50 years are our responsibility. We bring to you, our elders, the plans and dreams we've cultivated, asking for your wisdom, guidance, and blessing.
Thank you.
Thanks, Sarah. I don't know if any of you all, our elders, our wisdom figures, have any words of advice or words of response.
Never tire of hope. I wanted to say that I thought what you lined out, Sarah, was wonderful. But one of the things, especially for Kath and me, when we undertook a very difficult work in 1976, was the parties. You know, CCA used to meet twice a year, spring and fall, and we always looked forward so much to the celebrations, the parties. And I remember somebody in Cora made the remark one time that that was one of the things CCA was noted for. But it was a very great celebratory time. I mean, not to sound frivolous, we dealt with serious things as well, but those parties were so wonderful. And so when you made a reference to gathering different places to have a bonfire or whatever, that's a very, very important component, I think. And a lot of friendships were made and strengthened through that socialization. So I encourage you to do that. More parties. More parties.
More parties, Sarah. Remember that.
Yeah. Well, I would just like to say that listening to Sarah and what the young people brought up, I have no fears at all about the future of CCA. We are leaving it in wonderful, capable, spirit-filled hands. Thank you. Blessings.
I didn't have the book handy before, but Sarah, I want to recommend that maybe a young group, study group, Anthony Flaccavento's book. It's I don't know if you can see it. They're building a healthy economy from the bottom up.
Yes.
And it has a subtitle somewhere, harnessing real world experience for transformative change. I think this is the most extraordinary book for regenerating rural life that I'm aware of. And it requires fundamentally breaking with the economic system we have now. But Peter Morin always said, you plant seeds for the new society within the shell of the old. You don't attack it because they'll come and kill you. You know, they really will, and they're going to kill a lot more people real soon. So just ignore them and rebuild something big, something important from the ground up. And I have a hunch that's what you're going to do.